Today I'm challenging candidates McCain and Obama to join me in calling for a 10-year moratorium on the foreclosures of all primary residences owned by legal American citizens. It's part of a 4-point plan that they can implement immediately to show their leadership abilities as senators. This plan will provide both job and debt relief to all legal American citizens at a time of unprecedented economic uncertainty. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Bruce Kane. I'm the author of The New Agenda for America, a set of policy planks favored by many Americans, but ignored by the corporately financed candidates Obama and McCain. I'm also running as a write-in candidate for the 2008 presidency in order to illustrate that there are sensible alternatives to many of our current policies that are not being given due consideration by either Congress or the presidential candidates. For the last year, the elite, through a corporately controlled media, has been promulgating what I like to call the big lie about home foreclosures. The big lie goes something like this. The only people losing their homes over the last 2 years has been Americans who had no business purchasing a home in the first place. It is not only a big lie, it is a calculated lie. And the purpose of the lie is to cover up the real reasons for the levels of home foreclosures now threatening to exceed those of the Great Depression. The big lie on foreclosures is an attempt to cover up the ongoing economic destruction of the American worker, the destruction of our jobs, our pensions, our Social Security, the devaluation of our dollar, and much more. All these things taken together constitute a perfect storm of destruction of both the American worker and the American family. Only a traitor would allow such policies to continue. Truth be told, both our presidential and congressional representatives have sold out the American people and have also nearly destroyed our Constitution. My introduction into the New World Order came about 8 years ago. I was working as a systems analyst and needed to pick up my family's health insurance. My wife wanted to go part-time and health insurance was not provided for her as a part-timer. I checked with Pat, the executive secretary where I worked, and she assured me that health insurance was part of the benefit package and it should be no problem. About a month later, some odd things began to occur. I started getting written up for trivial things like saying silly in a meeting. Despite my excellent work record, they fabricated a paper trail over the next year and ultimately fired me. The day I was fired, I had just returned from a medical leave. Pat had previously assured my wife that they were excited about my return. But immediately upon my return, Pat called me to a meeting with Gary, the company's chief financial officer. At the meeting, I was told that I was immediately terminated and my family's medical insurance would end at midnight. In addition, they informed me that because they were firing me for cause, I would not receive any unemployment. It took over 6 months of litigation before the Michigan Labor Board determined that I was not fired for cause. But even though they falsely fired me, all I got out of the deal was an unemployment check. This is a company with no concept of family values. To the contrary, this is a company that is willing to throw American families into the path of a train in order to maximize their profits. And if it means replacing hardworking Americans with foreigners, that doesn't appear to be a problem. It is important to note that the day I was fired, my office was already occupied by an Indian programmer who could barely speak English. Nearly 8 years later, the entire IT staff of this company is dominated by foreign IT workers who ironically are getting paid through federal and state taxes of American citizens. It has only been in the last few years that I've been fully able to understand just how badly our government has screwed millions of other blue and white collar workers. And as the good jobs continue to go to foreigners, Americans are unable to pay their mortgages. That is the real foreclosure problem in the USA, the displacement of American workers through cheap foreign labor. We are being betrayed. The fact that our own government is purposely targeting American workers and incentivizing the replacement with younger foreign workers is a crime. Consider the following. The cost of providing health insurance by your employer doubles between the ages of 30 and 50. So a given employer can save nearly $6,000 a year by merely hiring a younger foreign worker. Ageism is becoming the new racism, yet no one is talking about it in the corporate-controlled media. Because many foreign workers are dual citizens, the employer does not have to contribute 6.5% of their gross pay to Social Security. These are just a few examples of how U.S. businesses are profiting by getting rid of American workers. And whether this foreign worker sits at your desk in the U.S. or a desk in India, China, or some other third world country, you're still going to lose your job and probably your career. And what is driving this is probably the biggest lie of them all: free trade agreements. The concept of free trade agreements goes back to the economist Ricardo, who looked at free trade in terms of comparative advantage. But the globalists conveniently ignored Ricardo's warning that in order to ensure mutual gains of trade, only consumer goods and producer goods must be allowed to cross borders. For if labor or capital crosses borders, all the capital will flee to the place where there is absolute advantage. And that's exactly what's happened. Our jobs in factories have been shipped out to China, India, and other cheap labor markets, and this is why we can no longer pay our mortgages. This is why we're going bankrupt. And the last 5 presidents and your congressional representatives did this to you. Doesn't it make you at least a little bit angry? Meanwhile, the top 1% benefits with each additional job loss because the only reason they can continue profiting off their stocks and hedge funds is if they can continuously reduce the cost of labor and seduce the worker into more and more debt. And when their subprime investments tank, they can just have the Fed bail them out and give the American worker the bill. And this bailout can be summarized by the phrase I begin to hear lately. We are seeing, quote, the privatization of profit and the socialization of debt. In other words, the Fed will bail out the elite's bad investments and the working class will ultimately foot the bill. Obama will ignore this. McCain will act like he doesn't understand it. But the fact of the matter is our government is screwing its own people. So now the government needs to unscrew the people. Some form of fair but massive debt relief is required right now in order to salvage the American worker and the American family. Otherwise, we'll be displaced literally by foreign workers. Consider this. Current projections estimate that over 5 million American families will be left homeless due to home foreclosures between January 2007 and December 2008. That means roughly 1 out of every 20 American families have been thrown out in the streets in just the span of 2 years. The average retiree only has $60,000 in their account at the time they retire, barely a year's wages. And growing numbers of retirees are going bankrupt as they enter retirement because they're unlikely to have supplemental income such as pension, paid medical benefits, etc. What is to become of the American worker and the American family? Well, if we continue this, Jefferson's warning will come true, for he warned us in the following statement. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations and those that grow around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Jefferson's warning is becoming today's reality, and it must be stopped. I challenge Obama and McCain to implement the following 4-point plan immediately to save American workers. Today is July 18th, 2008. Here's the 4-point plan. 1. Implement a 10-year moratorium on all foreclosures on primary residence occupied by legal American citizens. 2. Send out the 12 million no-match letters in order to get rid of all visa overstays and illegal immigrants from our workplaces. This could instantly create over 6 to 10 million jobs for American workers. These no-match letters are currently held up in federal court. 3. Impose a strict 20-year moratorium on all immigration into the United States, which includes moratoriums on anchor babies and chain migration. Immigration is the primary driving force in population growth, and we cannot afford any further growth. We are already seeing water shortages on the east and west coasts. 4. Implement emergency legislation to force all U.S. businesses to e-verify every single worker that applies for a job. It is more than evident that the globalist model is a recipe for economic disaster. Also evident is the need to protect American families during this unprecedented transition between economic models. The New Age agenda for America will aid in this transition by stopping further immigration in the North American Union, bringing back our industries, and working towards an era of sustainable energy independence. For more information on my write-in candidacy and the New Agenda for America, I highly recommend that you visit my website, New Age Citizen. To watch other videos pertaining to the New Agenda for America, please go to this link. The peaceful viral internet revolution needs to get started right now. It's time to take our country back. Anyway, I'd like to thank you. My name is Bruce Kane. I'm editor of New Age Citizen and your write-in alternative for the presidency.